Hey Reddit, I guess I never thought I'd be the guy posting here, but here I am. My name's Ben, and I'm in my late 30s. I've been married to Lisa for nearly 10 years now, and up until recently, I thought we had a solid marriage. We've had our ups and downs like everyone else, but I figured that was just part of being married. I'm not the most romantic guy, but I've always tried to be supportive and caring. I work hard, provide for our family, and make sure we're comfortable. Lisa and I have one daughter, Emma, who just turned 6. She's the light of my life. Lisa was never the most settled person, if you know what I mean. She's always had this wild streak, which was part of what drew me to her in the first place. She's outgoing, loves to party, and has always been the social butterfly in our relationship. I, on the other hand, am more reserved. While she enjoys being the center of attention, I've always been content just hanging back and watching from the sidelines. I thought we balanced each other out, but lately, I've been feeling uneasy. Lisa has been going out more, dressing up in ways she hasn't done since we first started dating. She started having girls' nights almost every weekend, something that was never really her thing before. At first, I tried to brush it off as her just needing some time for herself. After all, I know being a mom can be exhausting, and if she wanted to blow off some steam with her friends, I figured it was harmless. But it wasn't just the nights out. She'd come home late, often smelling like she'd bathed in perfume, and she'd barely acknowledge me or Emma before heading straight to the shower. She'd take her phone with her everywhere, even to the bathroom, and whenever I'd ask who she was texting, she'd snap at me, saying I was being paranoid. I told myself I was imagining things, that maybe I was just feeling insecure. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. One night, things started to unravel. Lisa had gone out for one of her girls' nights, and I was home with Emma, putting her to bed. I remember sitting there, trying to read Emma a bedtime story, but my mind kept drifting back to Lisa. She hadn't told me where she was going or with whom, just that she'd be out late. It was like this wall had come up between us, and every time I tried to get close, she'd push me away. After Emma was asleep, I went to the living room, picked up my phone, and just sat there, staring at it. I debated texting Lisa to ask where she was, but I knew it would only lead to another argument. She'd probably accuse me of being controlling, of not trusting her. So, I let it go. Or at least, I tried to. But something was eating at me, something that wouldn't let me rest. A little after midnight, Lisa still hadn't come home, and I was growing more anxious. I went to the kitchen to grab a glass of water, and that's when her phone buzzed. She'd left it on the counter, a rare oversight. My heart raced. I knew it was wrong to look, but I couldn't help myself. I picked up her phone and saw a message flash on the screen. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. Beautiful. My stomach dropped. I scrolled through her messages, and sure enough, there was an entire thread of text between Lisa and some guy named Jake. They'd been talking for weeks, maybe even months, and from the messages, it was clear they weren't just friends. There were late-night texts, inside jokes, and plans to meet up. The kind of messages you'd expect between people in a new, secret relationship. The worst part? It wasn't just flirtation. The messages were explicit, detailing what they'd done together and how much they couldn't wait to do it again. I felt my chest tighten, anger and betrayal boiling up inside me. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to do anything to release the rage building up in me. But I couldn't make a sound. Emma was asleep in the next room, blissfully unaware that her world was about to be shattered. I sat there, phone in hand, as the reality of it sank in. My wife, the woman I'd loved, trusted, and built a life with, was cheating on me. The next morning, I could barely sleep after finding those messages. I spent the night pacing the living room, replaying every memory, every recent argument, every moment she'd come home late. It all made sense now, and the anger simmered just below the surface, mixing with a sadness that felt like it was tearing me apart from the inside. Lisa walked in around 9 a.m., acting like nothing had happened. She glanced at me with a casual, "Good morning," and moved toward the kitchen to grab a coffee, like she hadn't just spent the night with another man. She didn't even seem to care about the fact that she was coming home to her husband and daughter after being with someone else. I stood there, waiting, watching her go through her routine as if we were in some twisted version of normalcy. Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Lisa, where were you last night?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked at me, clearly annoyed, and sighed. "I already told you, Ben. I was with Stacy and the girls. Why do you keep asking?" I couldn't believe the audacity. "With Stacy and the girls, huh? So, Stacy's new name is Jake now?" Her face froze, her coffee cup hovering midair, and I knew I had her. "I saw the messages, Lisa," I continued, my voice shaking with barely contained anger. "I saw everything. Don't lie to me." For a moment, her face went pale, and then she shifted, putting on this defiant, almost amused expression. "Oh, so you're spying on me now," she said, crossing her arms and narrowing her eyes. "Maybe if you actually paid attention to me once in a while, I wouldn't have to find attention elsewhere." Her words hit like a slap. She was turning it around on me, making herself the victim, as if I was the one who'd done something wrong. I tried to keep my composure, but my voice rose in spite of myself. "So it's my fault you've been sneaking around behind my back? My fault you've been cheating on me with some random guy?" She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Maybe if you weren't so boring and predictable, I wouldn't have to look for excitement elsewhere." Her tone was dripping with contempt, and I realized just how little respect she had for me, for us, for our family. I stood there, numb, as she continued her tirade, listing every flaw she could think of, every reason why I was to blame for her betrayal. She made it seem like she was the one suffering, trapped in a life with a man who wasn't enough for her. Her words stung, each one twisting the knife deeper, but I knew in that moment there was no reasoning with her. She was completely unapologetic, deflecting everything, as if what she'd done was justified. I didn't have the energy to argue. I just turned and walked away, retreating to the spare room to collect my thoughts. I felt broken, betrayed, and humiliated. But one thing was clear. This wasn't the woman I'd thought I'd married. After the confrontation, I locked myself in the spare room, trying to process everything. It felt like my world had collapsed in an instant. Every moment, every memory with Lisa now felt tainted, like a cruel joke that I hadn't been in on. I had trusted her, built a life with her, and this was how she repaid me? The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was emotional, tearing at the very foundation of everything I believed about her, about us. I sat there, replaying her words in my head. "Maybe if you weren't so boring and predictable." Those words stung the most. Here I was, a man who'd done everything to provide a stable life for my family, and she had the audacity to call me boring? I'd sacrificed, worked long hours, all to make sure she and Emma were taken care of, only to find out that she saw me as nothing more than some placeholder while she chased after her own thrills. The rage I felt was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I wanted to scream, to break something, anything to release the frustration. But even more than the anger, there was this hollow feeling, this aching emptiness. I realized then that I wasn't just grieving the betrayal. I was grieving the life I thought I had, the person I thought Lisa was. I looked around the room, the walls closing in on me. I thought about Emma and what this would mean for her. She was so young, so innocent. She had no idea that her mother was tearing our family apart. How would I explain this to her? How could I let her grow up in a home where her mother treated her father with such disrespect? The thought of Emma growing up thinking that this was what love looked like broke me even more. The next few days were a blur of emotions: anger, sadness, numbness. Lisa went about her life as if nothing had happened. She didn't even try to talk to me, to explain, to apologize. She was cold, distant, and it was like I was living with a stranger. The woman I had loved, the mother of my child, had become someone I didn't recognize. But amid all the chaos in my mind, one thing became crystal clear. I couldn't live like this. I couldn't let myself be treated like I was disposable, like I was somehow to blame for her betrayal. and I couldn't let Emma grow up in a home filled with resentment and bitterness. I had a decision to make, and I knew it wasn't going to be easy. After days of being trapped in this emotional limbo, I knew I had to make a choice. I couldn't let Lisa walk all over me and pretend everything was fine. I couldn't let Emma grow up in a home where her mother disrespected her father. I'd always believed in working things out, but this was beyond repair. Lisa's betrayal wasn't just a lapse in judgment. It was a reflection of who she'd chosen to become. The woman I'd once loved and trusted was gone, replaced by someone who felt entitled to stomp on my heart without a second thought. One evening, as I sat in the quiet of the spare room, realization hit me like a lightning bolt. I was done. I couldn't fight for a marriage that only I seemed to care about. Lisa had shown her true colors, and no amount of effort on my part could change that. She didn't respect me, and she certainly didn't deserve my loyalty. The decision was clear. I would file for divorce, but I wouldn't just quietly walk away. No, she'd shattered my life, and I was going to make sure she felt the consequences. If she wanted to act like I was disposable, I'd show her that I could move on without her, that I wasn't the doormat she seemed to think I was. I decided I'd go for full custody of Emma to give her a stable environment away from Lisa's toxicity. I contacted a lawyer the next day. I laid out everything: the infidelity, the lies, her unapologetic attitude, and they assured me I had a strong case, especially with the evidence of her affair. I was relieved to hear it. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of control, like I was finally steering my life back on track. But that wasn't enough. I needed to confront Lisa one last time, not for reconciliation, but to let her know exactly what I thought of her and the mess she'd made of our family. I wanted her to understand that she'd not only lost me, but had also lost any claim to the life we'd built together. The next morning, with my lawyer on standby, I told Lisa I wanted to talk. She rolled her eyes, clearly annoyed, but I could see a glimmer of curiosity. I imagined she thought I was going to beg her to stay, to forgive her, but she was in for a rude awakening. We sat down in the living room, the tension thick in the air. Lisa looked at me with that same dismissive expression, almost as if I were wasting her time. She probably expected me to beg, to grovel, to try to win her back. But I wasn't that man anymore, not after everything she put me through. "Lisa," I started, my voice steady, "I want you to know that I'm done. I've made the decision to end this marriage." For a moment, her face flashed with shock, but it quickly turned to indifference. "Oh, really?" she sneered, crossing her arms. "You think you're just going to walk away, take Emma, and pretend like none of this ever happened?" I met her gaze, unfazed by her hostility. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I have everything documented. The affair, the financial discrepancies, all of it. You've made it clear that this marriage means nothing to you. So I'm taking Emma and leaving you to live the life you apparently wanted so badly." Her face went pale as the realization dawned on her that I was serious. But then, in typical Lisa fashion, she switched to anger. "You can't take Emma from me," she spat. "I'm her mother. She needs me." "Needs you?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean the way she needs a mother who spends every weekend with some guy instead of being home with her family? Or the way she needs a mother who treats her father like he's invisible?" For the first time, Lisa didn't have a response. She just sat there, staring at me, a mixture of rage and helplessness in her eyes. She'd never seen me like this, standing up for myself, refusing to play the role of the quiet, loyal husband who would put up with anything. I could tell she hated it, hated losing control, but I wasn't done yet. I leaned forward, looking her directly in the eyes. "Oh, and by the way, I know about the party at Jake's place. I know you invited our neighbors, our friends, to celebrate your new life. You wanted everyone to think I was the bad guy, didn't you?" Her face flushed, but she tried to play it off. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Save it, Lisa. You've been lying for so long you can't even keep track of your own stories." I took a deep breath, then delivered the final blow. "I'll be attending that party, and I'll be telling everyone exactly what you've been doing, how you've torn this family apart. You've spent so much time building this fantasy world, but I'm about to rip it down right in front of you." Her jaw dropped, and for the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. She had wanted to control the narrative, to make me look like the villain, but now, I was about to expose her for who she really was. The day of the party arrived, and I felt a strange mixture of nerves and satisfaction. I knew this was going to be messy, but after everything Lisa had put me through, I couldn't just let her walk away with her lies intact. I wanted everyone to know the truth, not just for me, but for Emma and the future I was determined to build without Lisa's toxicity. I arrived at the party, which was being held at Jake's house, Lisa's new boyfriend. The place was packed with neighbors, friends, and people from our social circle, all mingling and having a good time, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. When I walked in, there was an instant hush, followed by surprised murmurs. People looked at me like they couldn't believe I was there, and for good reason. Lisa and I hadn't been seen together for weeks, and the tension in the air was palpable. Lisa spotted me from across the room, and I watched as her face twisted from shock to anger. She rushed over, pulling me aside before anyone could hear us. "What are you doing here, Ben?" she hissed, barely containing her rage. "Oh, I just thought I'd join the celebration," I replied with a smirk. After all, I wouldn't want to miss the chance to catch up with old friends. She glared at me, her voice low and venomous. "If you cause a scene, I swear, I'll make your life miserable." I laughed, genuinely amused by her threat. "I think you've already done that, Lisa, but you don't get to control this anymore. I'm done playing the part of the quiet husband. It's time people knew who you really are." Without giving her a chance to respond, I walked to the center of the room and raised my voice. "Excuse me, everyone." The crowd turned to look at me, curious and confused. I saw Jake standing off to the side, his smug expression faltering as he realized I wasn't there for a friendly chat. "Most of you know me, and you know Lisa, my wife," I began, glancing around the room. "Well, I should say soon-to-be ex-wife, because as of today, I've filed for divorce." There were gasps, shocked looks, and whispers as I continued. "I wanted you all to know the truth about why we're ending things. Lisa has been having an affair with this guy," I said, gesturing toward Jake. "She's been lying to me, to our family, and apparently to many of you. This isn't just a messy breakup, it's a betrayal that goes against everything I thought we stood for." Lisa's face went white, her eyes wide with panic. Jake shifted uncomfortably, clearly not prepared to be put in the spotlight. But I wasn't done. "So if you're here to celebrate with her, you're celebrating with someone who didn't just cheat on her husband, but lied to everyone around her to protect her own selfish interests. And if any of you thought she was telling the truth about our marriage, now you know the real story." I turned to leave, but not before taking one last look at Lisa. Her face was a mask of anger, humiliation, and disbelief. She had tried so hard to paint me as the bad guy, but now, everyone saw her for who she truly was. And in that moment, I felt a sense of closure, a release of the weight I'd been carrying since the day I found out about her betrayal. I walked out of that house feeling lighter, ready to move on with my life, free from the lies and manipulation. After the party, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Exposing Lisa in front of everyone had been cathartic, a much-needed release after weeks of carrying the pain and betrayal in silence. For the first time in ages, I felt like I could breathe again, unburdened by the weight of her lies. But I knew this wasn't over. Now that I had filed for divorce and publicly outed her, there was bound to be fallout. Over the next few days, the news of our very public confrontation spread like wildfire. Friends and neighbors who had seen us as the perfect couple were now well aware of the cracks beneath the surface. I started receiving texts and calls from people offering their support, some apologizing for not seeing through Lisa's facade sooner. A few people even admitted they'd always felt something was off but didn't want to interfere. Meanwhile, Lisa's carefully crafted social life was crumbling. Her friends, the ones she'd been so desperate to impress, were distancing themselves from her. They didn't want to be associated with the scandal, And many of them felt betrayed too, knowing they'd been lied to. It was like she'd become a pariah overnight. And honestly, it felt like justice. As for Jake, he vanished as quickly as he had entered Lisa's life. I heard from mutual friends that he'd skipped town once he realized there was nothing left to gain from her. He'd been in it for the thrill, for the perks of being with someone willing to break the rules. But once reality set in, he had no interest in sticking around for the mess. Lisa was left alone, humiliated, and without any of the people she had once thought were her loyal supporters. Through all of this, my focus remained on Emma. She was my top priority, and I wanted to ensure that she didn't feel the effects of the turmoil Lisa had brought into our lives. I explained things to her in a gentle way, making sure she knew that her father would always be there for her, no matter what. She was too young to understand the full extent of what had happened, but I knew I could give her a stable, loving environment without the toxicity Lisa had introduced. The divorce proceedings were relatively smooth, given the circumstances. My lawyer managed to secure full custody of Emma, and Lisa's infidelity meant she had little ground to stand on in terms of alimony or assets. In the end, she walked away with only the basics, far from the life of luxury she had been chasing. It was a fitting end to her selfishness and greed. As the days turned into weeks, I began to rebuild. I reconnected with friends and family, surrounded myself with people who genuinely cared about me. And with each passing day, I felt stronger, more confident, and more at peace. Lisa had tried to take everything from me, but in the end, she had only freed me from a life built on lies. Months have passed since the party, the divorce, and the emotional storm that followed. Life looks completely different now, but in the best possible way. I'm no longer weighed down by Lisa's lies, her constant deceit, or the anxiety that used to gnaw at me every time she walked out the door. I've found peace, the kind of peace I never thought I'd have while married to someone who saw me as disposable. Emma has adjusted better than I expected, and that has been my biggest comfort. She's thriving, surrounded by love and stability. I spend as much time as possible with her, making sure she knows she's valued and loved. If anything, the whole ordeal has strengthened my bond with her. I want her to grow up understanding what genuine relationships look like, not the twisted version Lisa had been modeling. As for me, I've started to see this as a blessing in disguise. The betrayal was brutal, but it opened my eyes to things I'd been ignoring for years. It taught me that I deserve more, that loyalty and respect should never be compromised, no matter how comfortable life might seem on the surface. I'm working on myself, focusing on my career, my hobbies, and spending time with people who genuinely care about me. I even started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but it feels good to open myself up to new possibilities, to meet people who see me for who I am, not what I can provide. I'm cautious, taking it slow, but I'm optimistic for the future. If I could give advice to anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation, it would be this: trust your instincts and don't ignore the red flags. Love and loyalty are two-way streets, and if someone isn't willing to respect you, then they don't deserve you. I know it's easy to stay for the sake of comfort, routine, or fear of change, but sometimes letting go is the best thing you can do for yourself. In the end, Lisa's betrayal showed me who I am, what I deserve, and what I'm capable of overcoming. I lost a marriage, but I found myself, and that, in a way, feels like the greatest victory of all.